2, 3.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Welcome back to the front of the line. Today it's my distinct pleasure, honor to be talking with a friend and amazing musician, Mr. Marcus Tenney. This is a guy whose talents you need more than two hands to count on. He's equally comfortable on the trumpet as he is on the tenor saxophone, as he is as an MC, as he is as a producer. He's involved with, again, more bands than I can really count, with Butcher Brown, No BS Brass, as well as leading his own trio and quartet, both on the trumpet and the tenor saxophone. And so I'd like to welcome Mr. Marcus Tenney today. Marcus, thanks for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, man.
And so how is everything down in, are you in Richmond today, or where in the world are you?
Yeah, I'm in Richmond today. Getting just kind of gearing up for the year. Been going over dates and kind of organizing shows and whatnot for the rest of the year, or at least until the summer. Things are kind of volatile right now, but doing the best I can.
Sure. And what are some of those things? Are those like your own projects, or just sort of, the tours that you have with the various groups? Or?
Well, a lot of this stuff is projects of mine that have been sitting on the back burner because for the last couple of years I've been touring internationally, and so that kind of put the brakes on a lot of projects that I had lined up 2 years ago. And so a lot of musicians that I wanted to play with and stuff that I wanted to get set up kind of just stopped dead in its tracks. So a lot of these projects I'm trying to get out this year because I'm honestly tired of staying at the sheet music and not hearing any music. So a lot of it is my projects, and then also Butcher Brown has been doing a lot of great things as well. So my schedule planning has been not only getting projects into the schedule for me to work on, but also navigating the minefield that is Butcher Brown right now. So it's been tough, but it is a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you have so many things going. It must be tough I can imagine that it would be very difficult to navigate all that stuff. What was the international tour that you were on?
Well, maybe that was slightly longer than 2 years ago, but there was maybe like 3 years ago, No BS went to Europe twice in the span of 6 months. And we did two-week tours. And that was our first time in, no, that was not our first time in Europe. But that was the first time I had been to Europe twice within 6 months with the same band. You know what I mean? It was kind of a marker. And then for the last 2 years proper, I've been running around the United States and Canada and Mexico with various bands. So
that's really something, man. I mean, I love No BS as a brass appreciator and aspiring trumpet player, and you are just such a motivating factor for me, and just like such a benchmark for me to even try to get to half the level of proficiency that you are as a trumpet player. I mean, every time I see y'all with No BS, man, it just warms my heart to hear so much brass coming at me.
Lots of brass. That band also has projects in the works too that we're kind of getting squared away. No BS is gearing up for the second installment of the RVA Block Party, which is a thing that was thrown by Lucas Fritz out of Richmond, who runs a Broadberry performance venue. Cool. And so they've been gearing up for that, and so that is also in the mix of my plans as well. So craziness.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing, man. Well, walk me back for a second then, because I think I sort of remember you starting to play tenor saxophone, when I was living in Charlottesville. But sort of like, when did you start playing trumpet? You know, how did you decide that you also wanted to play tenor? You know, tell me about it.
Well, it's funny. When I was in school, I actually wanted to play saxophone. And so I wanted to play saxophone, but, you know, they had the day where you pick the instruments. And so they had already had a bunch of saxophone players, because I think the most popular instruments at the time were saxophone, clarinet, and percussion in general. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody wanted to play. So I wanted to play saxophone, but there were too many saxophone players. So I picked trumpet. And then just stuck with it and just kept playing. And I eventually ended up playing in a few bands in middle school, like as far as organized school bands. And then in high school, I was playing in the marching band, stage band, concert band. It was just always a thing. You know, I always just played music. Mm-hmm. And later when I got to VCU, I wanted to play saxophone. My brother had started messing around on the saxophone, but he's more of a visual artist. And so, you know, I just kind of took his saxophone and just started messing around with it. And eventually things got pretty deep. And so I just kept pushing that. And then eventually bought a tenor, because that's really what I wanted to play. And so I just, you know, now I'm having the same trumpet pursuit is going on with saxophone. And I'm constantly debating whether I need to throw other instruments into the mix, which I'm always voting yes on.
I mean, I saw this clip of you playing drums the other night at a rehearsal, and you sound really solid.
Yeah, I think that drums is the next instrument that I want to go for. Just because well, for me, it's more of and you know, this also coming from hanging out with lots of music makers, especially, you know, people like DJ Harrison.
Oh, yeah.
Just, you know, finding the soul of each instrument, like figuring out how to talk to it. Because each instrument has its properties and its like characteristics, just like, you know, each individual person. So trying to figure out how to engage with that instrument in a way where not only can you talk to other instruments with that instrument, but you can also gain a bird's eye perspective over the entire situation. And I feel like the more instruments that I get acquainted with, the better that bird's eye picture comes into focus.
For sure.
So it's all in the pursuit to sharpen more of a production standpoint for me, because I feel like that's my most comfortable place. But I don't, you know, trying to figure out what exactly that means in this current landscape is always tough. Drums is definitely the next instrument I'm going to dive into, though.
Yeah, man. I mean, because you do I love it, dude. Your like MC like thing with the tennis shoe and you've got serious flow, man. Like that's one of my. It's hard for me to pick a favorite part of your playing because I love so much about it, you know. But I can definitely see, you know, and especially, yeah, I mean, hanging with Corey Fonville, DJ Harrison, exactly. All these, like, great drummers.
Billy Williams, all these drummers, yeah, Jack Kilby, come on.
But yeah, man, it's like so much of it is within you already, you know. It's just going to be a matter of figuring out how to execute it because you clearly hear so much.
I'm at a point where I hear music constantly now. You know, I have so many different projects going on that spill into each other, you know, doing this hip-hop stuff, but then also playing with Butcher Brown in more of a fusion setting, going to No BS, playing in like a brass band that doesn't really play brass band music, and then doing studio sessions here, doing all of these different things. It just has music playing in my head all the time. So I just want to see if I can capture those things, you know, the way that an actual trumpet player would, an actual saxophone player would, actual drummer or actual whatever would.
One question I certainly have is, as someone who tries to dabble in other instruments too, but like, I mean, trumpet is such a motherfucker of an instrument, man. I mean, how do you navigate being able to deal even just like with the upkeep that is required of playing a brass instrument, and not to mention such a different embouchure that's required of playing saxophone. And that's one thing that just is so impressive to me about the level that you've been able to achieve. Because here I am just trying to do my, my long tones and my 6-note, Carmine Caruso stuff, and but just like the limitations of how long one, at least at my level, can play trumpet for at a time. It's just really amazing when there's the whole like, I need to get on the instrument, and then there's the whole, okay, I'm going to learn and work on vocabulary and terms and all this other stuff. So it's just so impressive that you're able to do that. Like, how do you divide up your time so that you can make sure that you're giving all these things that they're due?
Well, I recently, last few years, I try to like really organize time, because I had a number of musicians, there's different schools of musicians where there's people that think you need to be practicing this much time or this much time in order to get this much done, or this much time in order to get this much done. And then there's a smaller faction of musicians who believe that as long as you get the concept, it doesn't matter how long it takes, you just want to make sure it gets ingrained. And then there's everyone in between, So for me, I think that I tried, with my schedule, I tried to get a grip on time in a certain sense. Like, not just thinking about time from a musician standpoint, but thinking about it from like a human standpoint. We're going to be doing this. What's the most efficient way I can get this done? All throughout school, they would always preach, consistency is what wins. You can play for 5 minutes a day. If you do it every day for 1,000 days, you will accomplish more than if you practice 8 hours a day for however long you can, sustain that. And so those types of things always kind of bended my mind in a certain way. I'm like, if you practice 8 hours a day, you're going to get really good at it. But then also, I had to get in touch with what practice actually was. Some of it that comes from getting in touch with method books and getting in touch with all of that stuff, because you absolutely need that stuff. You have to have the framework in order to build, whatever you're going to build on top of it. So that comes from technical facility and all of that stuff. But then there's also just like going out and playing, like, because I used to be the type of trumpet player that would go out and just play with a rock band in the garage with no amplifier. Woo. So like I'm just in there like blowing my brains out. And then I can't play, I'd have ensembles and rehearsals the next day, and I can't make it through the rehearsals because I was playing at 4 in the morning when I had a rehearsal at 8 o'clock, And all of that beating myself up eventually turned into being lucky enough to not ruin anything and getting a grip on it and focusing in the right way. But then also with saxophone, I tried to take those same principles and kind of fast forward them in a sense, like cut out all of the excess stuff. So like, I decided early on that I was like, I'm going to focus on, the first couple years I played, I was focusing on just get a sense of how the instrument works from a playing standpoint. Just kind of play it and try to make a good sound and kind of figure out what that means to me, who doesn't know anything about saxophone. And then eventually I decided to start actively pursuing the technical framework. So that way any musical things that I was learning were getting put on top of a framework immediately. I already had facility. I already had a concept of music from a saxophone player's standpoint, from like checking out lots of saxophone players. And so it literally took half as much time to get musically to the same place with saxophone that it took with trumpet. And so sometimes it just makes me kick myself, because I'm like, if I would have just stopped wasting time, I would have been, much further on trumpet. But then I would have never, if I would have been any further on trumpet, I probably would have never took a second look at saxophone.
Right.
So it's always that fork in the road right there. And I feel like that fork in the road always shows itself in every decision too, because, just with the basic decision of deciding whether or not to practice, I have a million reasons to go either way. It's just like, I want to practice today. I want to make sure that this is kept up.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, it certainly seems like it took half as long, because all of a sudden, he just started showing up on the tenor, and it's like, wait, what?